Sarah Collins stepped off the bus and looked around the wide open training ground. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and discipline. Dozens of new recruits stood in straight lines, their uniforms still crisp and clean, their faces showing a mix of excitement and fear. For Sarah, it felt like she had just entered another world. A world where weakness was not allowed, and strength was the only language people respected. She clutched her small duffel bag and took a deep breath. This was it. Bootcamp. The place where ordinary people were turned into soldiers. For as long as she could remember, Sarah had dreamed of wearing that uniform. Not to show off, not for fame, but to follow the path her father had once walked. He had been a decorated officer, brave and respected, but he never came back from his last mission. Sarah was only 12 when she stood at his funeral, listening to the commander speak about honor and sacrifice. From that day, she promised herself that one day she would serve, just like him. But now, standing among tall, muscular recruits who looked like they were born for this life, Sarah felt small. She wasn't weak, but she wasn't big either. Her frame was light, her hands soft, her voice gentle. When she spoke, people often had to lean closer to hear her. She didn't look like someone who could lift heavy gear, crawl through mud, or survive long marches. And people noticed. As the drill instructor walked past, barking orders, a few recruits sneaked glances at her. One whispered something, and the others laughed quietly. Sarah ignored them. She'd expected this. She knew how people judged her, by her size, her softness, her calm way of speaking. But she also knew something they didn't. She had a kind of strength that wasn't visible on the outside. The first day was chaos. Orders shouted from every direction. Running, push-ups, lining up again, unpacking, repacking, more running. Sarah tried her best to follow, but she was slower than most. Her backpack straps dug into her shoulders. Her boots rubbed blisters into her heels, and sweat poured down her back. At one point, she tripped and dropped her canteen. The boy behind her chuckled and muttered, "Careful, princess." A few others laughed too. Her cheeks burned, but she didn't say a word. She picked up the canteen and kept walking. That night, in the barracks, Sarah lay on her bunk, too tired to move. Around her, others were chatting, laughing, some already snoring. She stared at the ceiling and thought of home. She missed her mother, her father's photo on the mantel, and the quiet of her small bedroom. But she also felt something stronger than homesickness, a spark of determination. She had come here for a reason, and she wasn't going to quit because of a few laughs. The next morning began before sunrise. The whistle blew, and chaos returned. Sarah stumbled out of bed, dressed fast, and joined the others outside. The air was cold and sharp. As the commander shouted instructions, Sarah stood straight, trying to look confident. Inside, her heart was pounding. They started physical training. Running laps, jumping hurdles, crawling under nets. Sarah struggled to keep up. Every time she slowed down, someone behind her sighed or made a comment. "You sure you belong here?" one girl said as she jogged past. Sarah said nothing, but she clenched her fists. Her legs felt heavy, her lungs burned, but she pushed forward, step by step, inch by inch. By noon, she could barely stand. Sweat had soaked through her shirt, and her arms trembled every time she lifted them. During the lunch break, she sat alone at the edge of the field, quietly eating. A few recruits walked by, still whispering and laughing. She didn't look up. What they didn't know was that she had already faced tougher battles, the kind that didn't happen on training grounds. When her father died, Sarah had watched her mother break down, and she had promised to be strong for both of them. She'd worked 2 part-time jobs, studied late into the night, and trained every morning before school just to prepare for this moment. So yes, she might be slower, smaller, and quieter, but she wasn't weak. Not at all. As the sun set that day, the recruits were ordered to line up again. The commander walked down the row, inspecting each of them. When he reached Sarah, he stopped for a moment. His eyes scanned her from head to toe. "You tired, recruit?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she said softly. "Good," he replied. "Means you worked." He moved on, and Sarah felt a tiny smile spread across her face. It wasn't praise, but it was something. A sign that at least someone had noticed her effort. That night, she sat on her bunk and quietly rolled up her sleeve. On her upper arm was a tattoo. One she never showed anyone. It was a symbol her father's unit used, surrounded by the words "for honor." For him. She touched it gently. It reminded her why she was here, and why she couldn't give up. Outside, laughter still echoed through the barracks, but Sarah didn't care anymore. She whispered to herself, "They can laugh all they want. I'll prove them wrong." She turned off her lamp, closed her eyes, and smiled in the dark. Tomorrow would be another hard day, but it would also be another chance to rise. The second week of boot camp was even tougher than the first. The new recruits were starting to show who they really were, the loud ones, the strong ones, the fast ones, and the ones who fell behind. Sarah Collins was still in the last group. She tried her best every single day, but no matter how much effort she put in, she always seemed to finish last. The mornings began with the whistle's sharp sound before dawn. Everyone rushed out to the field, half awake but trying to look alert. Sarah always ran straight to her spot in line, hair tied tightly, uniform neat, heart already racing. The commander would shout, "You're not here to look pretty, you're here to earn it." And the group would begin their run across the dusty trail. Sarah's feet pounded the ground. Her lungs burned, and her legs screamed for rest. The bigger recruits moved easily, laughing and talking as they ran. She tried to focus on her breathing, one step at a time, but she couldn't ignore the whispers. "She's slowing us down again," one said. "We'll never pass time trials if she keeps this pace," another added. The words stung more than the blisters on her feet, but she kept her head down and kept running. By breakfast, her body ached, but she refused to show it. She sat quietly, eating her food while others joked around the table. Sometimes, she caught them looking at her. One boy from another platoon smirked and said loudly, "I bet she joined just to get the uniform. Probably thought boot camp was like a fitness class." The table burst into laughter. Sarah didn't react. She stared at her tray, pretending not to hear, but inside her heart felt heavy. Still, she remembered what her father used to say. Silence is sometimes the loudest answer, so she stayed silent. During weapons training, Sarah had another hard day. The rifles were heavier than they looked. Her arms trembled after a few minutes, and the instructor barked, "Hold it steady, Collins. Even a breeze could shoot better than that." The others chuckled, and Sarah felt her face turn red. She wanted to disappear, but she didn't. She adjusted her grip, steadied her breathing, and tried again. The next shot hit closer to the target. Not perfect, but better. Later that day, the recruits practiced obstacle courses, crawling through mud, climbing ropes, jumping walls. Sarah's uniform was soaked, her hands covered in dirt. Halfway through, her foot slipped, and she landed face first into the mud. The group behind her burst out laughing. Someone yelled, "Hey, princess, you dropped your crown." She wanted to cry, but she bit her lip and pulled herself up. Mud dripped from her face, but she didn't stop. She climbed again, slower this time, but she made it over. When she reached the finish line, everyone else had already completed the run. The commander's voice was cold and sharp. "Collins, you're holding the team back. You think the enemy waits for the weakest one to catch up." "No, sir," she answered, breathing hard. "Then move faster," he said and walked away. She wanted to tell him she was trying harder than anyone, but she didn't. Instead, she wiped the mud from her eyes and walked back quietly. That night, when everyone was asleep, Sarah sat on her bunk and looked at her reflection in a small hand mirror. Her face was bruised, her knuckles sore, her uniform torn. For a moment, she felt broken. But then she remembered why she was here. She thought of her father's smile, his proud eyes, his words, "Real strength isn't loud, it's steady." She whispered those words to herself like a prayer. The next morning, things didn't get easier, but Sarah had changed a little. During drills, when people laughed, she stopped hearing them. She only heard her own breath and the sound of her boots hitting the ground. When she fell, she stood back up faster. When the others teased her, she kept her focus. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving to herself that she could do it. A few recruits began to notice. One girl named Mia, who had once laughed at her, started helping her during rope climbs. She didn't say much, but she'd give a small nod of encouragement. Sarah appreciated it more than words could say. But the rest kept mocking. They called her featherweight, baby soldier, porcelain. Sarah smiled to herself sometimes. Those names didn't hurt like they used to. She had discovered something new inside her. A quiet fire that no insult could put out. On the last day of that week, the commander ordered a surprise endurance challenge. The recruits had to run 10 miles carrying full gear. It was brutal. People were sweating, stumbling, cursing under their breath. Halfway through, Sarah's legs almost gave up. But when she looked around and saw others struggling too, something clicked. For the first time, she wasn't the only one finding it hard. She took a deep breath and kept moving. Step by step, breath by breath. By the final mile, most of the recruits who mocked her were slowing down. Sarah didn't run fast, but she didn't stop either. She crossed the finish line near the end, but not last. For her, that small victory felt bigger than any medal. When the commander called out her name in the roll call, he didn't comment on her speed or performance. He just gave a small nod, not approval, not praise, just acknowledgement. And that was enough for Sarah. That night, she fell asleep with a tired body but a proud heart. The laughter was still there, but it no longer mattered. She was beginning to understand something. In boot camp, everyone was fighting their own battle, hers just happened to be different. And soon, the same people who laughed at her would learn who Sarah Collins really was. Days turned into weeks, and the boot camp slowly began to feel less like punishment and more like a test of patience. The days were long, the nights short, and the work never seemed to end. But while most recruits complained under their breath, Sarah Collins stayed quiet. She had learned to live with the whispers, the laughter, and the exhaustion. What no one knew, however, was that Sarah carried something far heavier than her backpack. A secret and a strength that no one could see. Every morning before dawn, she woke up a few minutes earlier than the others. While the rest were still sleeping, she sat on her bunk, staring at a small, worn-out photo she kept hidden inside her locker. It was her father, standing tall in his army uniform, smiling with pride. The picture was taken just a few weeks before his final mission. Sarah touched the photo gently, whispering to it like it could hear her. "I'm here, Dad. I made it." Her father, Captain Robert Collins, had been more than a soldier, he was a hero. People still spoke his name with respect. But for Sarah, he wasn't just a name in a speech or a medal on the wall. He was her teacher, her guide, and the reason she never gave up. He had always told her stories of courage, of soldiers who didn't run from pain but walked through it. Real bravery, he once told her, isn't about being fearless. It's about moving forward even when you're scared. Sarah had those words carved into her memory, and every time she felt like quitting, she remembered them. But no one in boot camp knew any of this. To them, she was just the quiet girl who was always one step behind. They didn't know why she pushed herself so hard, why she stayed late after drills to practice alone, or why she never spoke about her family. They didn't know about the tattoo hidden under her sleeve, a mark of her father's unit, the same one he had worn on his jacket. It wasn't a decoration, it was a promise. One evening, after a particularly hard training day, Sarah stayed behind on the field. The sky was turning orange, the air filled with the smell of sweat and dust. Everyone else had already gone to the barracks to rest. She picked up her rifle and aimed at the distant target. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion, but she kept steadying her breath. "Focus," she whispered to herself. She fired. The bullet hit near the center. Better than before. She reloaded and tried again. Closer. Again. Closer still. She didn't notice Major Daniels, the commander, watching her from a distance. He had stayed behind to review reports, but when he saw her alone on the field, he stopped. He didn't say anything. He just observed. When she finally lowered the rifle, covered in sweat and dirt, he walked closer. "Training's over, recruit," he said firmly. Sarah turned around, startled. "Yes, sir." I was just practicing, sir, she replied quickly. He looked at the target board, several shots clustered near the bullseye. You've improved, he said after a pause. Trying to, sir, she answered. He studied her face for a moment. Trying is good. But remember, effort doesn't show up on your record. Results do. Yes, sir, she said softly. He nodded once and walked away. Sarah stood still for a moment, watching him leave. She didn't need praise, the fact that he noticed was enough. That night, back in her bunk, Sarah rolled up her sleeve and looked at her tattoo again. The black ink, faded slightly from time, formed a symbol only a few people in the world would recognize. Around it were the words her father used to write in his letters. For honor. For him. Every time she saw it, she felt stronger. It wasn't just ink on skin. It was a promise she'd made to herself and to him. In the following days, something began to change. Sarah's body was adapting. She was no longer the weakest in the group. Her endurance improved, her aim sharpened, and even her posture seemed stronger. She didn't brag or celebrate, but people noticed. Some of the recruits who used to laugh at her began to stay quiet. They still whispered behind her back, but their voices didn't carry the same confidence anymore. During one of the runs, a girl ahead of her twisted her ankle and fell. Everyone kept running, but Sarah stopped, helped her up, and carried her bag for the rest of the trail. When they crossed the finish line, the commander shouted at her for breaking formation. But Sarah didn't care. She had done what her father would have done. That night, the same girl, Mia, thanked her softly. It was the start of a small friendship built on respect. Even Major Daniels began to notice her more often. She wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but she was the one who never gave up. And that mattered more in a soldier than muscle or speed. Still, Sarah kept her past to herself. She never mentioned her father's name, never spoke of the reason behind her tattoo. It wasn't for sympathy. It was personal, sacred. She didn't want people to treat her differently. She wanted to earn her place on her own. But deep inside, she sometimes wondered what would happen if the commander ever recognized the symbol she carried under her sleeve. Her father had served in the same branch years ago. Maybe one day he would notice. Maybe one day the story behind that tattoo would be known. For now, Sarah was content with silence. She had found her rhythm, her strength, and her purpose. Every bruise, every blister, every moment of pain reminded her that she was getting closer. Not just to graduation, but to proving to herself that she truly belonged. She was no longer just the girl they laughed at. She was becoming something else. A soldier, a fighter, and a living reminder of her father's legacy. And though no one else could see it yet, Sarah Collins was quietly becoming unstoppable. The sun had barely risen when the whistle blew, sharper and louder than usual. The recruits jumped out of bed, half awake, rushing to line up outside. It was the start of another long, exhausting day at boot camp. The air was cold, but everyone was already sweating, not from heat, but from nerves. Major Daniels had announced that today's training would be one of the hardest yet. Sarah Collins stood in line, her heart beating fast. Her arms and legs ached from the previous day's drills, but she refused to show it. Around her, some recruits whispered about what kind of challenge it would be. Maybe another long-distance run, maybe combat practice. Whatever it was, Sarah was ready. At least she thought she was. The commander's voice echoed through the field. Today we test not just your strength, but your spirit. Some of you will want to quit, and that's exactly when I'll find out who belongs here. The challenge began with a series of punishing exercises. Push-ups, squats, sprints, crawling through mud, climbing ropes, all under the scorching sun. Sweat ran down Sarah's forehead, her arms trembling as she pushed her body beyond its limits. The instructors shouted orders, demanding faster, louder, better. Every time Sarah slowed down, someone yelled, "Come on, Collins, move it." She tried. She really did. But her muscles screamed for rest, her lungs burned, and her vision began to blur. Still, she kept going. She told herself she couldn't stop. Not now, not ever. Her father's voice echoed in her head. Pain is temporary. Quitting lasts forever. By midday, Several recruits had already fallen behind. Some were sitting on the sidelines, holding their knees, begging for water. Sarah was still standing, but barely. Her shirt was soaked with sweat, her fingers shaking uncontrollably. When the instructor shouted for another set of push-ups, her arms gave out, and she hit the ground hard. The other recruits laughed quietly. One of them smirked. "Told you she wouldn't last." Another added, "Go home, Collins. This isn't for you." Sarah's face was pressed into the dirt, her chest heaving. For a second, she thought about staying down. Her whole body wanted to stop. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears. But then she saw something. A pair of boots stopping beside her. It was Major Daniels. He looked down at her without saying a word. His expression was calm but stern. Sarah forced herself to look up. "I can do it, sir," she said weakly, her voice trembling. "Then do it," he replied quietly. He didn't yell. He didn't insult her. His voice was steady, almost challenging. And somehow, that small moment lit something inside her. She planted her palms firmly in the dirt and pushed herself up again. Her arms shook violently, but she refused to fall. She did one push-up, then another, then another. The commander watched silently, his arms crossed. By the time she finished, her arms were like lead. But she didn't care. She had done it. The day continued with even more drills. Obstacle courses, climbing walls, carrying heavy packs uphill. Sarah stumbled more than once, but every time she fell, she got back up. The laughter and whispers around her began to fade. Not because they stopped, but because she stopped hearing them. Her world had narrowed down to one goal: keep moving. Later that afternoon, the recruits were told to form groups for team endurance training. Sarah ended up in a team with the same people who often mocked her. They groaned in frustration. "Great," one boy muttered. "We'll lose because of her." The challenge was to carry a heavy log through a long, rough trail. Each team had to lift it together, moving in perfect rhythm. The log was massive, rough, splintered, and painfully heavy. At first, Sarah's teammates ignored her, taking most of the weight themselves. But halfway through, they began to slow down. Their arms shook, their breathing grew ragged. Sarah saw it and immediately stepped forward, taking a bigger share of the weight. "Don't," one of them said between breaths. "You'll slow us down." But she didn't listen. She tightened her grip and lifted. Pain shot through her shoulders, but she held on. "Just move," she said. "We can do this." Something changed in that moment. The team looked at her, the quiet girl they had laughed at, and saw determination in her eyes. No fear, no anger, just willpower. They started moving again, together this time. And somehow they made it to the end before time ran out. When they dropped the log, everyone collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. The commander walked past them, his boots crunching on gravel. He stopped for a second near Sarah and said, "Not bad, Collins." It was only 2 words, but it felt like the highest honor she'd ever received. That night, Sarah could barely move. Every inch of her body hurt. Her arms were bruised, her knees scraped, her back sore. She lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, too tired to even speak. But deep inside, she felt something new: pride. For the first time since boot camp started, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like she belonged. As the lights went out, she rolled up her sleeve and looked at her tattoo. The words glimmered faintly under the dim light. "For honor. For him." She whispered, "I didn't quit, Dad." Outside, the camp was silent. The same people who had mocked her now saw something different. Maybe they didn't say it yet, but they had started to respect her. And Major Daniels, though he never showed emotion, had noticed her strength too. That day had almost broken her, but instead, it had made her stronger. She had reached her breaking point and pushed right past it. Sarah Collins didn't just survive boot camp that day. She began to rise. After the day she reached her breaking point, something inside Sarah Collins changed. It wasn't a loud change, not the kind people noticed right away. It was quiet, steady, and powerful, like a fire burning deep inside her that refused to go out. She woke up earlier than ever, even before the whistle. While everyone else was still half asleep, Sarah would be out on the training field, jogging in the cold morning air. Her body still ached from the past weeks, but she didn't let the pain control her anymore. She had learned something important. Pain was proof that she was getting stronger. When the others finally came out for drills, they would find her already warmed up, standing tall, ready to go. Some recruits rolled their eyes, whispering that she was just trying to show off. But the truth was, Sarah didn't care about what anyone thought anymore. She wasn't there to impress them. She was there to prove something to herself. The commander noticed her too. Major Daniels had seen countless recruits come and go. Some started strong and faded. Some looked tough but quit when things got real. But Sarah, the quiet one, the one everyone laughed at, kept showing up. She never complained, never argued, never gave up. He didn't say it out loud, but he respected that. The weeks that followed were the hardest of all. The drills grew tougher, the days longer, and the weather harsher. The sun scorched during the day and the cold bit at night. Many recruits began to lose their energy. Some even requested transfers. But Sarah only grew sharper. Her running improved. She was no longer the last to finish. Sometimes she even led the middle group. During obstacle training, she climbed faster, crawled quicker, and balanced with focus that surprised even herself. She had stopped worrying about being perfect. She only cared about doing better than she did yesterday. One afternoon during target practice, the recruits lined up to shoot. Sarah picked up her rifle with confidence. She remembered the nights she had practiced alone, how her hands used to shake, how she used to miss the mark. But now her grip was steady, her eyes focused. When she fired, the bullet hit near the center. Again and again. The instructor walked over, checking her results. "Collins," he said with a raised eyebrow. "Looks like you finally learned how to aim." Sarah smiled a little. "Just took some time, sir." By the end of the session, she had one of the best scores in her group. A few recruits who used to laugh at her now glanced her way with quiet respect. They didn't apologize, they didn't have to. Sarah didn't need their words. Their silence was enough. As days passed, something else began to happen. Some of the newer recruits started asking her for help. They had seen her struggle and now they saw her progress. One evening, a nervous young recruit approached her and said, "How did you stop feeling scared all the time?" Sarah thought for a moment, then said, "I didn't stop being scared. I just stopped letting it decide for me." That sentence spread through the camp like an unspoken truth. People started to see Sarah differently. She wasn't the weak one anymore. She was the one who kept going no matter what. Even her teammate Mia, who had once teased her, now trained with her every day. They became close friends, pushing each other to do better. When one of them felt like giving up, the other reminded her why they started. Sarah didn't talk much about her past, but one night, when she and Mia sat under the stars after drills, she opened up a little. "My dad was in the army," Sarah said quietly. "He didn't make it back from his last mission. I guess that's why I'm here. I want to carry on what he started." Mia listened, nodding. "He'd be proud of you," she said softly. Sarah smiled. "I hope so." The next day, Sarah's improvement was impossible to ignore. During the endurance march, one of the hardest tests, she carried her pack without slowing down once. When others stumbled, she helped them up. When her team was tired, she encouraged them to keep moving. Even the commander, who rarely praised anyone, watched her closely. At the end of the march, Major Daniels stood before the recruits. "Some of you," he said, "are starting to understand what discipline means. You don't need to be the biggest or the loudest. You just need to keep showing up." As he said that, his eyes met Sarah's for a brief moment. It wasn't a smile, but it was a look of acknowledgement, and that meant more to her than any medal could. By now, even the atmosphere in the barracks had changed. The jokes about Sarah had stopped. The same people who once laughed at her now greeted her with small nods of respect. They might not have said it out loud, but they admired her persistence. One evening, as she sat alone cleaning her rifle, she rolled up her sleeve and looked at her tattoo again, the symbol of her father's unit, and the words "for honor, for him," glimmered under the light. She traced it gently with her finger and whispered, I'm getting closer, Dad. Her transformation wasn't about muscles or speed. It was about something deeper: courage, endurance, heart. She had faced humiliation, exhaustion, and pain, but through it all, she had built herself into someone new, someone stronger, someone her father would recognize. The next morning, when the whistle blew, Sarah was already standing at attention. Her uniform was dusty, her boots scuffed, but her spirit was unshakable. She wasn't the girl who had arrived scared and uncertain. She was a soldier in the making, determined, resilient, and ready for anything. And though she didn't know it yet, the days ahead would test her in ways she never imagined. But for now, she had won one of the hardest battles of all, the battle within herself. The final weeks of boot camp arrived faster than anyone expected. The recruits had grown stronger, leaner, and more disciplined. Their laughter was quieter now, replaced with focus and a strange kind of pride. They had survived months of shouting, pain, exhaustion, and endless challenges. But now came the real test, the one that would decide who truly belonged. It was called the final test, a long and difficult field mission designed to push every recruit to their limit. It would test not just their strength or speed, but their teamwork, courage, and leadership. Some called it the Day of Truth. The night before the test, the barracks were silent. Even the usual chatter and jokes had disappeared. Everyone was packing their gear carefully, double-checking every strap, every bullet, every map. Sarah sat on her bunk, cleaning her rifle for the 10th time. Her hands were steady now, her movements calm and precise. Mia, sitting across from her, looked nervous. "Do you think we'll pass?" she asked softly. Sarah smiled faintly. "We've come this far. We'll make it." But deep inside, she felt a knot of fear. Not fear of failing, fear of letting her team down. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone working together. At dawn, the commander gathered them on the field. The sky was painted with orange light, and the cold wind stung their faces. Major Daniels stood tall, his voice firm and clear. "This mission will last 24 hours, he said. "You will move through rough terrain, complete assigned objectives, and return before time runs out. You'll face obstacles, fatigue, and confusion. Out there are no excuses, only results. Remember your training, trust your team, and never quit." The recruits nodded silently. Sarah's team of 6 checked their gear one last time. When the signal was given, they set off into the thick forest beyond the camp. The terrain was brutal. Mud, rocks, sharp branches. Every step felt like a battle. They had to navigate using only a compass and map, find checkpoints, and complete tasks under time pressure. Sarah led the group at first, her eyes scanning the path. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, burning through the treetops. Sweat ran down their faces. They crossed rivers, climbed small cliffs, and crawled under barbed wire. Every few miles, they had to stop and complete challenges, assembling equipment, carrying wounded dummies, or decoding signals. By midday, exhaustion hit everyone. Mia stumbled and almost fell. One of the boys complained that his pack was too heavy. Sarah, though tired herself, refused to slow down. "Come on," she said. "We've been through worse." Her voice wasn't commanding, but calm and sure, and somehow that gave everyone strength. When they reached the 5th checkpoint, they realized something: they were behind schedule. The team in front of them had already passed. Panic spread among the group. "We'll fail if we don't make it in time," one recruit shouted. Sarah looked at the map, her mind racing. The shortcut they could take went through a muddy hill, dangerous and steep, but it would save almost an hour. "We go this way," she said, pointing. The others hesitated. "That path looks impossible." "Maybe," Sarah said. "But impossible is what we've been doing since day one." And without waiting, she started climbing. The mud was slippery, and every step felt like sinking sand. She slipped twice but caught herself both times. The others followed her, grumbling and cursing, but they trusted her. When one of them lost balance, Sarah reached back and pulled him up. Her hands were scraped, her uniform covered in mud, but she didn't stop. When they finally reached the top, Everyone was panting hard. But when they looked ahead, they saw the next checkpoint in the distance. The shortcut had worked. For the first time that day, a small wave of hope ran through the team. As the day turned into night, the challenge grew harder. The forest grew darker, the air colder. They had to move quietly, using flashlights only when necessary. Fatigue weighed on every muscle, and hunger gnawed at their stomachs. A few recruits wanted to rest, but Sarah insisted they keep moving. "We rest when it's over," she said. Hours later, they reached the final stretch. A wide field filled with obstacles, smoke, and simulated explosions. It was designed to test their focus under pressure. The team crouched low, moving through the chaos. Loud bangs echoed around them. Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her head clear. She guided her team through the smoke, giving quiet instructions. Then, near the last obstacle, one of the recruits tripped and twisted his ankle. He fell to the ground, groaning in pain. The others froze. "We can't carry him and finish on time," one said. Sarah looked at the timer on her wrist. They had only 15 minutes left. She didn't think twice. "We're not leaving him," she said firmly. She took the injured recruit's arm over her shoulder and began to carry him herself. The others joined in, helping balance the weight. Together, they stumbled through the final obstacles, step by step. When they finally crossed the finish line, the timer beeped. They had made it with less than 2 minutes to spare. Everyone collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, covered in dirt and sweat. Major Daniels stood waiting. He didn't smile, but his eyes showed something rare. Pride. "Not bad," he said. "You finished. Together." Sarah looked at her team. They were exhausted but grinning. For the first time, no one looked at her as the weak one. They looked at her as a leader. That night, when everyone returned to the barracks, the atmosphere was different. There was laughter again. Not mocking laughter, but relief and celebration. Mia hugged Sarah tightly. "You led us through," she said. "We couldn't have done it without you." Sarah smiled, tired but proud. "We did it together." Later, when the lights were out and silence filled the room, Sarah lay awake. Her body ached, but her heart was full. She rolled up her sleeve and looked at her tattoo. "For honor. For him," she whispered. "We made it, Dad." Outside, the moonlight shone through the window, falling softly on her face. Tomorrow would be the graduation, the end of boot camp. But for Sarah, it felt like something bigger. She hadn't just passed a test. She had found her strength, her courage, and her place. And deep down, she knew her father would have been proud. The morning of graduation came with a quiet excitement that filled the entire camp. The sun rose over the hills, golden light touching the line of soldiers standing in perfect formation. The long months of sweat, pain, and hard work had led to this moment. Everyone looked proud. Their uniforms neat, their boots polished, their faces shining with relief and pride. Sarah stood among them, her heart racing. She couldn't believe it was real. The endless shouting, the punishments, the nights of doubt. All of it had led to this single day. The recruits were no longer just trainees. They were soldiers now. Major Daniels stood on the platform in front of them, his expression as serious as ever. But there was a glint in his eyes, a rare sign of respect. "You came here as strangers," he began, his deep voice echoing through the parade ground. "Some of you were weak, some were afraid. But today you stand here as one team, forged through fire. You've earned your place." The recruits stood straighter, chests lifted, eyes fixed ahead. When their names were called, one by one, they marched forward to receive their badges and certificates. Applause filled the air. Each name represented a story of struggle and victory. When Sarah's name was called, Recruit Sarah Collins, her heart skipped a beat. She stepped forward, her boots clicking against the ground, her posture straight and confident. Major Daniels handed her the certificate. "You did well, Collins," he said. "Very well." "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice steady. But before she could step back, something unexpected happened. The commander's eyes caught a faint mark on her wrist where her sleeve had slipped up slightly. It looked like part of a tattoo. He frowned slightly. Collins, he said quietly. What's that on your arm? The field went silent. Every head turned toward her. Sarah froze for a moment. She hadn't meant for anyone to see it. Her tattoo was private, meaningful, not something she ever planned to show. Sir, it's a tattoo, she said softly. The commander nodded slowly. Show it. Her hands trembled slightly as she rolled up her sleeve. The sunlight caught the ink, a symbol shaped like a shield with wings, and below it, the words for honor. For him. There was a pause. Then a low murmur spread among the recruits. The symbol wasn't random. It was known, the emblem of a legendary unit that had fought bravely years ago in a classified mission. Only a few soldiers had worn it, and one of them was a man named Captain David Collins, Sarah's father. Major Daniel's eyes widened slightly. He stepped closer, staring at the tattoo. Where did you get that? Sarah looked straight ahead. It was my father's, sir. Captain David Collins. He served under your command. For a long moment, there was complete silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. The commander's face softened. Captain Collins, he repeated quietly, almost to himself. He was one of the best soldiers I ever had. Sarah nodded. He was my hero, sir. He didn't make it back. I got this tattoo to honor him. Major Daniels took a deep breath. His usually firm voice trembled slightly when he spoke again. He was a brave man, saved more lives than most people will ever know. That symbol, it's not just ink. It stands for sacrifice, courage, and loyalty. He carried it with pride. Sarah's throat tightened. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. The day someone would recognize the mark. The day her father's memory would come alive in front of others. The commander looked around at the recruits. Do you all see this? He said firmly, pointing at the tattoo. This is not just decoration. This is history. This young soldier carries a legacy, one that represents the very best of what we stand for. The recruits stood silently, their earlier murmurs gone. Many of them looked at Sarah with wide eyes, some with surprise, others with respect. Major Daniels turned back to her. You should have told me, he said, his tone softer now. I didn't want special treatment, sir, she replied quietly. I wanted to earn my place like everyone else. The commander's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. You did. More than anyone. He saluted her then, something no one expected. For a moment, the entire camp froze, watching the commander salute a recruit. Sarah hesitated, then returned the salute, her hand shaking slightly. The moment felt unreal. The same man who once shouted at her for being too slow, too soft, now stood before her with genuine respect. When the ceremony ended, recruits gathered around her, congratulating her. Mia ran up and hugged her tightly. Sarah, I can't believe it. Your father was that Captain Collins? Sarah smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. Yes, he never came home, but he's the reason I kept going. I wanted to finish what he started. Mia grinned. You did more than that. You made him proud. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Sarah stood alone near the flagpole. The wind blew gently, carrying the distant sounds of laughter and music from the camp. She touched her tattoo once more, tracing the lines slowly. In her mind, she could almost hear her father's voice, calm, steady, and full of warmth. I'm proud of you, kiddo. She smiled, whispering back, I did it, Dad. I finally did it. Behind her, Major Daniels approached quietly. He stood beside her for a moment without saying anything. Then he spoke softly. Your father would have been honored to see this day. You have his strength, you know? Sarah looked at him, her eyes shining. Thank you, sir. That means everything to me. He nodded once. Keep that fire alive, Collins. Soldiers like you. They remind me why we still fight. As he walked away, Sarah stood tall, the sky glowing orange and purple. The laughter of her teammates echoed in the distance, but she stayed for a while longer, feeling the weight and pride of her journey. She wasn't the weak girl from the first day anymore. She was a soldier, one with a legacy written not only in ink, but in courage, heart, and honor. And the commander's salute? That was something she'd remember for the rest of her life. The camp was quiet now. Graduation was over. The flags had been lowered, and the recruits who once stumbled through drills were now soldiers ready to face the world. The sun had long set, and the night sky shimmered with stars. Sarah sat on her bunk, still wearing her uniform, staring at the small badge she had received that morning. It wasn't made of gold or silver, but to her, it meant more than anything she had ever owned. She turned it over in her hands, feeling the cold metal. On the back, her name was engraved Sarah Collins. For a moment, she couldn't help but smile. That name now carried strength, respect, and courage. Mia entered the room quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You're still awake?" she asked. Sarah nodded. "Couldn't sleep. Feels strange, doesn't it? Knowing it's all over." Mia sat beside her. "Over? It's just beginning. Tomorrow we go out there, real missions, real lives to protect." Sarah nodded again. She had dreamed of this for so long. Being part of something bigger, wearing her uniform with pride, serving her country. But it also felt heavy. The world outside boot camp was unpredictable, dangerous. And she knew that soon, she would face challenges far beyond drills and tests. After Mia went to sleep, Sarah walked outside. The air was cold, but she liked it that way. She wandered toward the edge of the camp, where the forest began, and looked up at the stars. For months, she had looked at this same sky and wondered if her father had once done the same. She whispered softly, "Dad, I did it. I'm finally a soldier." The wind rustled through the trees as if answering her. She smiled faintly. The next morning, the recruits were dismissed to begin their new assignments. Some were sent to different bases, others into specialized units. Sarah and Mia were both assigned to a field training division, a stepping stone before active duty. They packed their bags, saluted their commander one last time, and boarded the transport truck. Major Daniels stood watching as they drove away. His stern face softened for a moment. "Like father, like daughter," he murmured quietly before turning back toward his office. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Sarah adjusted to her new post, long patrols, field missions, and more advanced training. But she carried herself with quiet confidence now. Her fellow soldiers respected her, not because of her name, but because of how she worked. Always calm, always steady, never giving up. One afternoon, while checking equipment, she heard someone mention her father's name again. 2 senior officers were talking nearby. "Captain Collins," one said. "He was a legend. Saved an entire unit during that classified mission." "You remember?" "Yeah," the other replied. "It said he volunteered to stay behind so his team could escape. A real hero." Sarah froze for a moment, her heart pounding. She had never known exactly what happened that day. Her family was only told he died a hero, but the details were secret. Hearing it now, even just a piece of it, made her eyes fill with tears. That night, she sat under the stars again, holding her dog tags close. "So that's what you did, huh, Dad?" she whispered. "You stayed behind so others could live. No wonder everyone respected you." She smiled through the tears. "I want to be like that too. Brave. Selfless." From that night on, Sarah trained harder than ever. She took every mission seriously, learned from every mistake, and always put her team first. The others started looking up to her naturally. If there was a tough task, Sarah volunteered first. If someone was struggling, she was the one who helped. Months later, her unit was selected for a rescue drill, one that simulated real battlefield conditions. During the exercise, her team faced a tough situation where communication was lost, and one recruit was injured. Everyone panicked, unsure of what to do. But Sarah stayed calm, organized the group, and led them safely back with the injured recruit. After the drill, the supervising officer said, "That's the kind of leadership this army needs." Sarah didn't say much. She only smiled and thought of her father again. A few days later, Major Daniels visited their training base. When he saw Sarah, he stopped her. "I heard about your performance," he said. "Seems you've made a name for yourself already." Sarah saluted. Just doing what you taught us, sir. He studied her for a moment. No, you're doing what your father taught you, even if you didn't realize it. He believed that true strength isn't about rank or power. It's about heart. You've got that. She didn't know what to say. For a few seconds, she just stood there, speechless. Then she smiled and said softly, "Thank you, sir." As the months went by, Sarah's reputation grew. Her story, the quiet recruit who once got laughed at, became something of a legend among new trainees. They heard how she had turned her weakness into strength, how she carried her father's legacy with dignity, and how she never gave up, no matter what. One evening, during a small ceremony for new recruits, Sarah was asked to give a short speech. She stood on the platform, her uniform crisp, her voice calm but firm. "When I first came here," she began, "I was scared. People laughed at me, said I didn't belong. But I learned something important. No one decides your worth except you. Every challenge, every scar, every failure makes you stronger if you don't give up. I'm standing here today not because I'm perfect, but because I kept going." The recruits listened in silence, eyes fixed on her. "And one more thing," she added, rolling up her sleeve just enough to reveal the edge of her tattoo. "This symbol isn't just for my father. It's for everyone who fights with honor, who never quits, no matter how hard it gets." When she stepped down, the recruits applauded. Mia whispered, "You sounded just like him. Your dad." Sarah smiled. "Maybe, but now it's my turn to carry the legacy." That night, as she stood outside under the stars once again, she felt a quiet peace in her heart. The wind brushed against her face, and somewhere deep inside, she felt her father's presence. Not as a memory, but as a part of her. She whispered softly, "The legacy lives on, Dad, through me." And with that, Sarah Collins, the girl who once got laughed at in boot camp, walked back to her barracks with her head held high, ready for whatever came next. Because heroes never truly die. Their courage lives on in the hearts of those who follow.